Like every citizen in this country who is working hard to restore the Irish economy, I am deeply disturbed by the tape conversations involving these Anglo executives in 2008 and dismayed to hear senior banking executives refer to the banking crisis with such arrogance. The Irish taxpayer has grimly endured the austere cost of the bank recapitalisation and the bank guarantee. They are understandably outraged by these revelations. Irish citizens have suffered greatly as a direct result of the banking crisis and the events which have led to the bank guarantee. The recent revelations will only serve to reinforce the government's resolve to move this country back to the right direction by tightening up regulation and by enforcing it. It would not be appropriate for me to discuss the employment of specific individuals in the bank. Ultimately, it was the board and management of Anglo-Irish Bank, IBRC, which had responsibility for the ongoing staffing of the bank. As the Deputy will be aware, there was an extensive restructuring of the governance and management of Anglo-Irish Bank immediately following the nationalisation of the bank in January 2009. As part of that restructuring, all non-executive directors in the bank, other than the chairman and those appointed under the guarantee scheme, resigned and were replaced with a new board, and none of the new executives or non-executive directors were involved with the bank prior to nationalisation. In addition, there was an extensive reorganisation of the senior management team, commencing with the appointment of the former CEO of IBRC, Mike Ainsley, in September 2009. Following that appointment, the entire executive of the bank was replaced with an appropriately skilled senior management team to lead the newly formed IBRC. That was the combined former Anglo-Irish Bank and former INBC through the process of wind-down. Under the relationship framework, the board and senior management of the bank were responsible for all staff employment matters at the bank, and I had no role in this matter. Nonetheless, the tapes do raise serious issues, and this government is committed to ensuring that the public is fully informed about what happened in Irish banks in the lead-up to and during the financial crisis. The government has published the Houses of the Oireachtas Inquiries, Privileges and Procedures Bill 2013, which, if enacted, will provide the legal framework for a banking inquiry to be held within the current constitutional parameters. I expect that once that legislation is on the statute books, the Houses of the Oireachtas will move quickly to progress that inquiry. It is important that all relevant parties participate fully with any resulting inquiry.
I have to interrupt the Minister there. The rest of the reply will appear in the official.
Thanks.
Deputy
Minister, the question was quite simple: whether you regret continuing to employ Mr. John Bowe and Mr. Peter Fitzgerald, the later till February of this year. And you know, you've passed the buck here onto the board of the bank. In October 2011, I asked you a question, and the question was how many of the top 50 senior executives that were employed in Anglo-Irish Bank prior to the crash were still employed. You were very forthright in your answer. You said 22 of the top 50 were still employed by the state, and 19 of them were earning in excess of €175,000. Now, Minister, John Bowe, who are now, and Peter Fitzgerald, who are now household names as a result of the Anglo Tapes, are two of those individuals that were continued in employment of the state by you as Minister for Finance. There were others who I named in this House before who were, there's no doubt about it, and we don't need an inquiry, who were involved in reckless lending at that bank. One of these employees in the Anglo Tapes left his position in February of this year. Now, this is at the same time that the public are going through huge austerity. We've been promised by government to, sweep out the banks, to clear out the banks, to burn the bondholders. That was the chant that you had from your government before the election, and it's clear that that isn't what has happened. Not only did you fail to burn the bondholders, and indeed one of the first things you did was pay the promissory note that was due on the 31st of March 2011, but you actually protected these individuals the same way that you protect Richie Boucher, who was the head of retail division in Bank of Ireland in the run-up to the crash, who now is in charge of the bank and commanding a salary of €843,000. So I want to put the question again to see if I can get an answer. Minister, do you regret continuing the employment of Mr. John Bowe and Peter Fitzgerald as one of the 22 senior executives in that bank before the crash, who you told this House 2 years ago were still in the employment?
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
The new management and staffing arrangements of IBRC Anglo Irish Bank took place long before I became Minister for Finance. I have no role in the day-to-day running of any of the banks, and decisions about who works in a bank or who doesn't work in a bank is a matter for the board and for the management of the bank. I also think you're moving into very dangerous ground when you name individuals and when you assume culpability, because this is exactly what happened when Mary Harney had a rant against former Taoiseach Charles Haughey, and in court subsequently it was found that she had prejudiced the case and charges couldn't proceed.
Thank you, Minister. 1 minute for a final supplementary.
Clear, Minister, for a long time that those people that were in the senior positions in Anglo Irish Bank, regardless of the Anglo Tapes revelation, should not have been an employee of the state. These individuals earned more than you, Minister for Finance, up until February of this year. They earned more than the Minister for Finance, and they were involved in a bank that cost the state over €30 billion in losses. And we see the face of that, we see the pain of that in every single community around this state. Can I ask you, Minister, there's been a lot of talk in terms of fitness and probity. Why did you not instruct that the senior executives in Anglo Irish Bank were subject to do a fitness and property test to ensure that they could continue in a senior position to restructure that bank? Why didn't you speak? You know, you were a former leader of Fine Gael. Why didn't you speak to another former leader of Fine Gael, Alan Dukes, who was appointed as Public Interest Director, to see what he knew of any reason why any of the 22 were not continued in the employment of the state and rewarded salaries in excess of what you yourself earned?
Thank you,
Minister, have you taken it upon yourself to inquire whether any other types of tapes exist in Bank of Ireland and AIB, and have you ensured that all people who were in a senior position in this bank, Anglo Irish Bank, are no longer working in any institution, financial institution in the state that the state is bailing out?
Thank you. Final reply, Minister, on this question.
Yeah, it's a matter for the directors, boards of banks and management of banks to decide who works in a particular bank and who doesn't work in a particular bank. But I'd remind the Deputy, and I'm sure he's disappointed with the fact that I brought in a special liquidator and liquidated IBRC last February. So, you know, we closed it down. Now, you'd love to be here this morning pointing the finger across and saying they're still working there. You know, you'd love to be at that. But I'm sorry to disappoint you. We did liquidate the bank and we moved it on.
Margaret, Shane Ross has the next priority question, number 64, and I call on the Minister.
I can confirm that neither I nor any officials in the Department of Finance were aware of the contents of the tapes which have emerged in the media until now. The contents of the tapes were not raised with my department by the Board of Management of IBRC, and my attention has not been drawn to any government member, staff, advisor or associate of the department who was previously made aware of the content of the tapes. I am further advised that the Central Bank was not aware of the tapes or the content contained therein until the recent publication. I am advised that the tapes had previously been provided by Anglo IBRC to the Gardaí and a number of other authorities involved in investigations related to Anglo Irish Bank. I also understand that the recordings have been provided by way of discovery to certain legal proceedings involving IBRC. From the date of the nationalisation of Anglo Irish Bank on the 16th of January 2009, the Minister for Finance directed the bank to cooperate fully with all regulatory investigations. I am advised by the bank that they fully cooperated in that context, and the bank has provided originals and copies of large data sets under compulsion and court order to the Chartered Accountants Regulatory Body, to the Garda Bureau of Fraud Investigation, to the Office of Director of Corporate Enforcement, the then Financial Regulator, and the Nyberg Banking Commission. In particular, the bank has informed me that in 2009, the ODCE seized under court search warrant approximately 3 million electronic documents and in excess of 5,000 original hard copy documents. In 2009, the Financial Regulator compelled the production of approximately 45,000 hard copy documents and approximately 9 million electronic documents. The electronic material remains in the possession of the bank as the financial regulator investigation was deferred in 2009 pending DPP proceedings. In 2010, the Garda Bureau Fraud investigation under court order received significant quantities of electronic and hard copy documents and recordings requested in respect of 18 employees of the bank whose lines were recorded. In 2010, the bank was compelled to provide large volumes of electronic and hard copy material to the Nyberg Banking Commission. Minutes of the meetings, as requested, were provided to CARB, to the ODCE, to GBIFI, the Banking Commission and the Financial Regulator. And in civil litigation, copies of various items, including certain recordings, were provided to parties in such litigation. I am advised that the special liquidators are taking the leaking of this material very seriously. They have written to the Gardaí and the Data Protection Commissioner in that respect. They have written to all parties whom they know to have access to this material, and I am also advised that the special liquidators intend to appoint an independent party to investigate if the leak came from IBRC or KPMG. These investigations are ongoing.
Chuck the Shane Ross. 1 minute per
I'd like to thank the Minister for his reply. And I accept everything he says about who knew what when and when these tapes were handed over. What surprises me about his reply is this. It's well known that all conversations of this sort were recorded and that they were all taped. And what I can't understand is why nobody in the department, but particularly in the central bank, who was the regulator at the time, knowing full well that the staff of Anglo and the Bank of Ireland and Irish Life Permanent and AIB recorded all conversations, particularly in certain situations, particularly with the head of capital markets, who is a key figure in this. Why the regulator in particular didn't ask immediately that the crisis broke, immediately that there was a question about solvency or liquidity, for these tapes to see what had been going on inside the bank if they had any doubt. Because the Minister said himself, and I think he's right, he said that at the time when Brian Lenihan, the former Minister of Finance, came in to the department, to the Dáil, and said there was 7 million looked for, and then came a few weeks later and said there's a bit more looked for, and then there's a bit more looked for. He could work out what was going on, that there was something funny going on at the least, that there was a teaser being put out by Anglo-Irish Bank to the central bank to grab them in and then to suck them in for more.
Thank you, Deputy.
What I want to ask really is this question. Is it not extraordinary that in those circumstances, when anybody with knowledge of this matter could guess what was happening, that the regulator, who was being taken for a ride, did not ask for taped conversations of what was happening inside Anglo?
Thank you. Minister?
Yes, seemingly he did, you see. As I said in my original reply, in 2009, the financial regulator compelled the production of approximately 45,000 hard copy documents and approximately 9 million electronic documents. The electronic material remains in the possession of the bank as the financial regulator investigation was deferred in 2009, pending DPP proceedings. So, as I understand it from the information provided to me, the DPP did commence an action. He compelled, I presume under court order or under his own authority, the production of all this data. But then his investigation didn't proceed because there was an indication that criminal proceedings would commence, and his investigation was suspended because of the possibility of DPP proceedings.
Thank you, Minister. I accept that. My quarrel is that he didn't ask for them much earlier than that. He didn't ask for them in 2008 when the crisis broke. He didn't ask them at the time that he was saying that they were both all the banks were solvent. He didn't look for these tapes at the time. The tapes were obviously in existence. That is an extraordinary situation. To do it under pressure under court orders is a completely different matter. His job is to regulate. Could you answer the second part of my question, maybe? What's happening now in terms of Bank of Ireland and AIB at a similar time and since? Are there tapes in existence of which we should be aware? And the second part is this. I'm worried, as I think many members of the independent group are, that the scope of the inquiry is limited simply up to the night of the guarantee. I can't understand why that is essential. I can understand the reason why the inquiry should concentrate on the guarantee. But there are other matters which should be subject to investigation as well. There was a night here which all of us can remember, which was the night of February the 7th this year, to which the Minister referred, which was the liquidation of Anglo-Irish banks. And there was confusion that night.
Thank you, Deputy.
There was chaos that night in what was happening, and there were changes going on. And I would have thought, I'm just finishing, Minister, it would be helpful and balanced and less political if the government was prepared for any inquiry to look at tapes and the facts and the events that happened on that night, and including that night as well.
Thank you, Minister.
The question of whether tapes exist in the other banks, I assume they do. I mean, if you ring a bank looking for a statement, there's usually some kind of warning on the answering machine that tells you your conversation could be recorded. But what I was unaware of was that there was internal recordings of conversations between bank executives. I thought it was the outside calls in that were being recorded. Now, I've inquired subsequently, and I'm told that it's the practice always to recall calls in and out of the Treasury. So the Treasury Department of the bank, for obvious reasons when you think about it. So I assume that there are recordings of calls in and out of Treasury in the other main banks as well. And I think the banks should be on alert if they weren't before, certainly from today on, as you have raised it, that this electronic data may be required by the Oireachtas inquiry when it's put in place.
Marks.